All right, welcome back to a bonus episode of the Blasters and Blades podcast. So, hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies, a place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So, without further ado, let me tell you what we're doing right now. We're getting ready to release some of the archive that we found from when we were the sci-fi shenanigans. We're going to get those up there for the posts that were brought down. We thought you might enjoy them, and so without further ado, let us roll that beautiful. Oh wait, they're going to sue me. Play it.
Hey, all you crazy sci-fi fans. Time for your daily dose of insanity over here at the Sci-Fi Shenanigans podcast with your hosts, J.R. Handley and me, Chris Winder. Just two nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions. A place where the sky's the limit, space is the place, and nerds run the world. Without further ado,
all right, welcome back to another episode of the Sci-Fi Shenanigans podcast. Today, I'll be interviewing their solo. Chris is a little bit under the weather. I won't even make the gratuitous crown jokes because, you don't want to hit a man while he's sick. He might barf on you. So instead, we are going to interview the authors of the Orion Connie. We have returning guest, speak much, Jonathan Yanez, and his co-author, Chaney. So welcome to the show. So since we've had Jonathan on before, and some people might be familiar with him, we're going to start with you. So I'm going to introduce J.N. Chaney. J.N. Chaney is a mysterious soul, though it has been confirmed that he is a master of fine arts and creative writing and fancies himself quite the Super Mario Brothers fan. He migrates often, sometimes even with the season, but was last seen in Avon Park, Florida. Any sightings should be reported as they are rare. I can confirm that he was once seen in Las Vegas, though it could have been a mirage. Just saying.
Hey, it's nice to be on the show. I actually live in Vegas now, so no longer in Avon Park.
Wow. So he's so mysterious, he doesn't even tell Amazon. He's like, no, they'll find me when they need me. The Bezos knows all.
Yeah, I need to get all that updated. But I moved here probably 3.5 weeks ago or so, something like that.
Outstanding. So are you liking it there in the sunny Vegas?
Oh yeah, it's great. I haven't been here through the summer, so like that dry, like imposing heat that everybody talks about, I haven't experienced that yet. It's mostly been dry cold. So freezing temperatures at night, they get down in like the 30s and 40s. Not quite used to that, but luckily I'm an author, and so I just stay inside all day.
Outstanding. So the second.
Did you have to change your wardrobe, Jeff? Did you have to buy some more stuff when you moved over to Vegas? Because all your stuff is probably for like hotter weather in Florida, yeah?
Yeah, I have a ton of t-shirts, so I need to go out and buy like some long sleeve stuff. The only thing is, it's going to get like really hot here again, so I don't know how much I really need. But I need some kind of coat because I bought like a hoodie, or I brought my hoodie. And that thing is just like, it's so thin that it's almost like negligible. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah, we have to get you like some sort of like Sherlock Holmes, like a big coat or something like that.
Right. I see people walking around like that, and I'm always like, that's like really, it's like over the top, but I think it looks really cool. So I'm just like really envious of their nerdy, trench coat.
Yeah, or like Constantine. That guy knew how to dress.
Exactly.
So if you don't go for the pea coat and you go for the Sherlock Holmes coat instead, you've got to get the slouch hat and the pipe.
Oh, cool. Obviously, yeah.
Because those go together. Everyone knows that. So the second part of the introduction, dear listeners, I talked about how I first found them. So I met Jeff at the Atrium Bar, a smoky little section of Las Vegas that's the epicenter of hopelessness and despair. I was about to put my last nickel into the machine and give it a go, but Jeff talked me off the ledge. He bought me a complimentary water because he's generous like that, and gave me the most cryptic life lesson I've ever received. The house always wins, he'd said. I nodded along sagely, but he wasn't done. And on the Ides of March, they win twice, so avoid the Caesar. Bada boom. All right, that's the best I got. Chris is the jokester, people. I'm sorry. All right, but I
We need
did
to get you
seriously
like a
live in
little.
Vegas.
We need to get you like a little trained monkey that
Yeah,
does the whole like the drum and the clang like brunch.
yeah. Or I'll just leave the jokes to Chris. But he was sick, so what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? All right, and our second guest is author Jonathan Yanez. According to his profile, he's more animal than man. He bleeds caffeine, and I'm sure he's kidding, right? It sounded cool though. So he writes because that's what he was born to do, and he freaking loves doing it. I have since named him when I found out how fast he writes the Cyborg Wolf. He loves the Wolf moniker, and there's no way he's human when he writes that quickly. So now you know he's part man, part machine, part wolf. And when he's not writing those crazy stories, he's at home with his lovely wife and 2-year-old daughter creating crazy stories. So,
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Now, when I wrote that introduction that I partly stole from your Amazon page, it said 2. Now, she's still 2, your little space marine?
Yeah, she's still 2. She turns 3 in April.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's not out of date yet. I'll have to remember that if we have you back on again. Sometimes we forget to update things, but all right. So this is the part where I tell you how I first found Jonathan. We covered that in episode 24, so check it out. And if you haven't listened to it, what are you doing with your life? But instead, I thought it'd be kind of cool, since you can go back and listen to how we first found Jonathan, to find out what my impression was of him after I met him in person. So as I ran into him at the conference center in Vegas, where I also met Jeff, and I remember thinking, dude, less Red Bull. I mean, seriously, the dude has more energy than any one person should have. So clearly cyborg, right? So it works.
Yeah, like South Park had an episode about man, bear, pig. So I'm
Right.
like man, wolf, machine.
I believe it. Absolutely. It makes perfect sense. Perfect sense.
It's like that. Those CRISPR kids, I have the wolf DNA and the machine DNA in me.
So this is not in the show notes, but I'm going to ad-lib it a little bit. So how did Jonathan and Jeff, how'd you two meet each other?
Do you want to take this one, Jeff?
I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, it feels like I've known Jeff a lot longer than I probably actually have. I want to say earlier last year, probably like just through Facebook at first, and then started talking about books and marketing and stuff like that. And then it wasn't until this year sometime, maybe around, what do you think, August, Jeff? Do you think August is around when we started talking about co-writing?
Yeah, somewhere around there. I think that's about right.
Yeah, so Facebook basically is how we met, and then started talking about possibly doing a co-authorship and what that would look like. And we have a really good system now. I think maybe just streamlining 1 or 2 more things, and we're pretty much just have a machine rolling with our production.
So the cyborg Zuckerberg introduced you, the cyborg wolf, to Jeff. So does that make you part cyborg too as well, Jeff?
Maybe. I don't know.
All right. So we'll move along. So we know we asked Jonathan these questions, but we've gained new listeners since we aired episode 24. So Jonathan, you get to answer too. If you've heard this before, we apologize, but you get a new shiny Jeff to talk to. So plus, we're going to talk about a new set of books that seems pretty exciting to me. I already bought my copy. So without further ado, let's get this started. So the religion question: Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly? You go first, Jeff.
Man, that's really tough. I'd say Star Trek, and then Firefly, and then Star Wars.
Wow, I might have to kick you off for that, but let's see if John can redeem it.
I think I still have to stick with my answer for the first time around, which was Stargate.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
You can't go wrong with that one. So, all right.
But then after that, I think maybe Firefly.
Firefly was good, but they ended it too soon. Too soon.
Oh, of course. Yeah, for sure.
So, what do you love about science fiction as a genre, Jeff?
Well, the biggest thing, I guess, would be the thing that sets it apart from every other genre in fiction is its ability to predict the future. And I don't just mean that in like a hypothetical sort of way. I mean that in like a very literal way. There have been sci-fi stories and books, short stories that have accurately predicted inventions and technology of the future. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea predicted the first submarine. There's actually a submarine that's modeled directly after the Nautilus that works and is fully functional using the what Jules Verne had written as a description for that. There have been predictions, like Orson Scott Card predicted online blogging with Ender's Game before that became a thing. There's even I think it's H.G. Wells. I think he was the one that wrote this, but there's an old play about a war between, it's a sci-fi play about a war between France and Germany, where I think Germany drops a bomb on France, and it's the biggest bomb that's ever been produced, and it uses an unknown element in the play, a recently discovered unknown element, to create the explosion. And in the play, they call it the atom bomb. And this was several years before the invention of the actual atomic bomb. And the play directly inspired the scientist working on the bomb, and that's why we call it that. And there's like a whole documentary series that your listeners can check out if they're interested, called Prophets of Sci-Fi and Prophets of Science Fiction. And it just goes through like all these like historic instances where sci-fi authors have accurately predicted the future, and that is like a huge responsibility to take on, but it's also like very rewarding, because if you you look at the golden age of sci-fi, the three big names, right? Like the big three: Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, and Heinlein, and they all had books where they came up with like new inventions that had never really been thought of before. And now today we actually have those inventions in real life. People looked at those things that they made and they thought out to a very like micro level, and we created them. Scientists got in a lab, they said that's a great idea, and then they named the invention after the thing in the book. And that's happened countless times. So science fiction has that ability. Like, just because you're not a scientist, you're not a physicist or an engineer, doesn't mean that you can't create things and then inspire other people in the future to do that. And additionally, like, you can inspire budding physicists, future physicists and future scientists to get out there and like explore the universe. Carl Sagan famously had a painting outside of his office of Mars, from not the real Mars, but the one from Edward Rice Burroughs' book, John Carter of Mars, or the first book's called A Princess of Mars. And he would look at that painting every time he went into his office, because that's the series that inspired him to become an astrophysicist when he was a child. So, and that's, he's like one of the most famous astrophysicists of all time. So, that's the great thing about writing in this genre, is you have no idea when you're coming up with these like crazy ideas, who you're going to inspire to actually one day create that idea and make it a reality. Everyone laughed at Star Trek, back in the day when they had their little flip, devices, their comms and everything. Teleportation, the transporters, warp drive, all these different things that they had invented in the show, really as sort of an easy way to communicate and get to places. But there are scientists out there right now working on making all of those things real. Like, we have cell phones in our pockets now, and Star Trek had that first. So you never know, if you're going to write a book that's going to one day become a reality, or some facet of it is going to become a reality. But that's why sci-fi to me is so interesting and so unique from every other genre out there.
Wow, that was deep. Probably the longest answer we've gotten to that question. So do you think you can live up to that one, John, as you answer what you love about science fiction?
No, definitely. I'm not even going to try to live up to that one. But this is going to tell you a lot about Jeff's and I relationship, my answer. So I just like messing around. So I just like the unlimited possibility. I think that's why I like Stargate the best out of all the different sci-fi movies or shows, is because you can go through that Stargate and there could be anything on the other side, and there's nobody to tell you like, oh no, that couldn't exist. Sure it could. Anything can exist in sci-fi. So that's my number one reason why I love the genre, because for me it equals freedom.
Okay. I like that answer. The infinite possibilities. So, all right. So, what's your first memory of watching, reading, or playing games in the genre of science fiction, Jeff?
Greatest memory playing games in sci-fi?
No, I said watch. What's your first memory of science fiction? Whether it's reading a book, watching a TV show, playing a game.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, watching Star Trek: The Next Generation with my dad. That's back when I was probably like 8, 9 years old. He tried before that to get me to watch Star Wars: A New Hope when I was like 6, and I was bored to tears because it wasn't a cartoon. But eventually, I went to Russia, and I spent a summer there in the foreign exchange program. And while I was there, I only had like Russian movies to watch, and because I wasn't fluent, I could only speak a few phrases and stuff. I would get so like frustrated and bored, and I was like, do you have anything that's in English that I can please watch? And the guy that I was staying with, the family, they had Star Wars on VHS, all 3 of them. And so I would put that on in my room, and I would just watch that like every day. I would watch one of those movies, and I cycled through them over a 2-month period so many times that I had like most of it memorized. And that's what got me into Star Wars. Before that, I didn't really know much about it, but I was obsessed after that. And then, of course, my dad got me into Star Trek. But those are probably my 2 earliest serious exposures into sci-fi. And afterwards, I would watch anything with spaceships in it.
That's cool. I didn't know you went to Russia, Jeff.
Yeah,
new stuff all the time.
Yeah, I spent 2 summers in Russia. I spent a semester of high school in China, and then I spent a summer in Africa.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of that. That's cool.
World traveler. All right. What about you, John? What's your first memory of watching or reading or playing games in the genre of science fiction?
I think I'm with Jeff, where I think it was Star Wars that I was sick when I was little. And again, on the VHS, at our house, we didn't watch a whole lot of TV. So when we were able to watch TV, it was kind of like, like a big deal or like a treat. So when we were sick, we could sit in front of the TV and my mom would let us watch stuff. So I was sick, and I think somebody lent us Star Wars movies. So I was watching those on VHS. And yeah, that's my very first memory of sci-fi, watching Star Wars.
Okay. So yeah, it's funny what you watch when you're sick. I used to watch the Rambo movies and all of them back to back. And if you do that, you will find, by the way, that his scars move around.
Do you know that there's a new Rambo coming out?
Really? Schwarzenegger? Schwarzenegger Stallone, or is it a new guy?
Yeah. Stallone. He's fighting the cartels now.
Wow. Okay. Never say die. Good for him, I guess.
Yeah, he's back at it.
Good for him. All right. So now Rambo is a show note. So how did your love of the genre of science fiction transition into your writing novels in it, Jeff?
Well, I always read stories with my mom, and like she always like pushed reading every night, and so I grew up reading, but I didn't really grow up reading science fiction. I'm from like a really small town, and I went to a school that, they just never made you read anything. So if it wasn't for my mom, I never would have read a single book. When I got to be about 17, and this was after I tried writing my own stories, and they were just awful, but those were science fiction stories. And I think that I was inspired mostly from gaming and from anime and movies and things like that. So I wasn't really I didn't really get into it because of books. It wasn't until I got to be about 17 or 18 years old where I read Ender's Game. And when I picked that up, which was recommended by a friend of mine that I played EverQuest with, and I picked that one up, and I read it, and I was blown away. I was like, this is the most amazing book I've ever read. I got super into it to the point, like so much so that I went and I read it immediately again. So just back to back, And after I finished that story, I felt so connected to the main character more than I ever had any fictional character, that I was like, this is amazing. I want more of this. So then I went out and I read the Forever War, Starship Troopers. I started going backwards and going over the last 50, 60 years and reading as much as I could. And I went back and I read Ender's Game after all that again, and that's when I was like, I was in my first year of college. I was bouncing around from different majors. The whole time I was writing stories on the internet anonymously, and I was like really enjoying that. And so after reading Ender's Game, I think for the third time, I decided, I really like sci-fi. I really like this style of writing. I think I want to do this. And so I started writing science fiction stories on the internet, whereas before it was more like fantasy, like video game fan fiction, that type of thing. And then from there, I had to pick a major, after 2 years in college. And I had the option of literature or creative writing. And so I had a discussion with my mom about it, and she said, well, if you like to write, just do it, follow your dream, make this happen if that's what you want. And so one day on a whim, because we had to pick, I said, screw it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to major in creative writing. And so I think that was the moment right there where I pretty much made that decision. This is what I'm going to do. And, all throughout college, every writing assignment I had, I tried to write sci-fi, much to the frustration of my professors. And because, they all wanted literary fiction. And I was like, well, I'm not about that life. So it's going to be spaceships and genetic engineering and sci-fi craziness. And so I kept doing it, and I kept reading it. And I kept getting feedback from friends and family and people on the internet, and which really, let's be real, your friends and family don't really give you the best criticism. So if I wanted brutal honesty, I had to go online. And I just kept doing that. And I did that for probably a decade until I felt comfortable enough to where I was like, okay, now I'm going to write a book because I finally feel like I'm ready. I'd put in all those years of practice before I felt like I could stumble out of the gate and actually try. A lot of people don't wait that long, I've noticed, from the people in this industry that I've talked to. But I think that I just needed to.
Wow. So whatever happened to those early writings? Are they still available around?
No, I think the website I used to post to went completely defunct. The owner didn't pay the bill or something. But nobody would want to read that stuff anyway. I wrote a short story. Well, I guess it was half of a novel after a while, and it was never finished. But if you're a Legend of Zelda fan, which I'm sure some people are, I love Zelda. I was obsessed, and I wrote a story called The Fourth Triforce Piece, and it was just about Link and Zelda and their kids and stuff, and Ganon comes back, and it was just this really long story that really didn't have an ending, but it sort of helped me understand how people what people want in stories. I would post a chapter on the internet on this web forum, and then people would give me feedback, and they'd be like, oh, I like where this is going, or I don't really like that, or this was boring. And surprisingly really useful information that really helped me evolve as a writer, helped me learn proper grammar and style and all that. And then eventually when I got into my major and I started taking classes, I felt like I was a little bit ahead because I had been doing this already for a few years, and I'm getting critical, harsh, blunt feedback from people, online.
Okay. So what about you, John? How did your love of the genre of science fiction transitioning to your writing novels in it?
I think my love of the genre, how it comes out, or when I first started writing sci-fi, because I've only been writing sci-fi now for a year. Before that, it was more fantasy or urban fantasy. But I think my love of the genre comes out when writing just with the characters and character development. So everybody who knows me knows I like comics and like superheroes. My favorite hero is Wolverine. And I love the fact that that character, Wolverine, because he's lived so long, he's lived through, World War II to the present day, to some comics even further on, that he's that same character. He's that same kind of reluctant hero, no matter what setting that you put him in. So you could put him in World War II, you could put him in Vietnam. He's the same guy. You could put him up in space in a spaceship, and he's that same character. So I think character development is what has brought me to sci-fi, and it's kind of like helped me expand by not only can we write these great stories here on Earth, but there's like space to be explored with these same great characters.
Fair enough. All right. So what do you think is the largest influence on your writing? Is there one author who you've always enjoyed and try to emulate? Is it an experience you had as a child? We'll start with Jeff.
I guess it depends on the series, because with the Variant Saga, which is my first series, I very much took inspiration from Ender's Game, because it starts with a boy that is like 7 years old. Both stories do. Whereas, the later books, like now Renegade, focuses on a very different character, an adult man in his like late 30s, early 40s, who is, a reluctant hero, anti-hero type person who is very brash and crude and sarcastic and, drinks heavily. Very, very different. And so I would say, like, early on, in my writing career, and when I got into reading, Orson Scott Card he was a huge influence on me. And so my first series naturally reflected that. Over time, I think that has changed. I don't read his stuff anymore, and not because it's not good or anything like that. I just think that I've moved past it as far as my tastes go. A lot of the places I draw influence from actually don't come from books directly. They come from other forms of media. So things I grew up with, like anime and like sci-fi anime. So we have like Cowboy Bebop, particularly for Renegade Star, like Cowboy Bebop, Outlaw Star, Trigun, those types of space westerns. And those were shows that I grew up watching excessively. If they were on, I would stop whatever I was doing to watch them. And then later on, shows like Battlestar Galactica and Firefly, Star Trek, and so on and so forth. Stargate, was a massive show for me growing up, like in high school and college, which is probably why I had like portals and Stargate type devices in my first series. But also video games too, like a lot of people discount games, but Fallout was a big influence on my first series. And, I love playing games with ships, spaceships. And like I was a big fan of Dead Space and, Mass Effect, especially. And like, Star Wars The Old Republic and so on and so forth. So I draw a lot of inspiration from those types of things, and movies, of course. But like as far as books go, really it's about the last thing I read. And more recently that was like Red Rising, and I've been reading a little bit more of Stephen King. For a little while it was Kurt Vonnegut, so it all just depends. But I think that's really how it is for a lot of people. We're consuming so much media that a lot of it just like buries itself in our heads, and it just never leaves. So, that comes out in our writing a lot.
Okay. So basically a sum of all parts.
Yeah. Particularly, like I said, anime and, really like 80s and 90s, movies and shows.
All right. What about you, Jonathan? What is the single largest influence on your writing?
Oh man, the single largest. I'm like Jeff. I feel like my mind is like a meat grinder of like different things that I consume. So whether it's like an anime or a audiobook that I'm listening to now, or just like in passing conversation, like what somebody said, Like it's all fuel for the fire when I sit down at the computer. Like growing up, for sure, I would say books wise, it was C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. I love those guys. I read Chronicles of Narnia multiple times, as well as Lord of the Rings. But nowadays, yeah, it's just I don't really have a whole lot of time to sit down and read just because life is bananas. JR, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Life is, I mean, they're just like everything's pulling for your time. So I listen to audiobooks now. And then even when I'm watching like, My Little Pony with my daughter, there's things from that I can pull too. I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. Pinkie Pie and Applejack are having drama. I can work with that in my next book.
So that's been a running joke. This show is affiliated with the Keystroke Medium podcast and YouTube channel, and one of their newer hosts made a joke once about a year ago. She was going to write My Little Pony Space Marines. So that's been a running joke. Obviously, you couldn't do that because of copyright, et cetera, et cetera. But somebody should write something that's similar. That would be kind of funny.
Dude, you give me 2 weeks, I will pump out a book for you. That's instead of Little Pony, will be like My Murderous Pony, the Space Marine edition.
Do it. I would totally buy it. We'd have you back and talk about it even.
Instead of Applejack, we'd have like a character named Apple Crack.
Do it. I'll make sure she listens to this episode too. All right. All right. So transitioning from the writing side, let's talk about things from a fan-centric angle. So have you gotten any cool fan art or had anyone cosplay your characters yet, Jeff?
So you said fan art or cosplay?
Correct.
Yeah, so I haven't had any cosplay yet. That's like next level stuff. No, I've had fan art has been sent in, which is pretty cool. I had a fan draw Jace, and had a fan draw Renegade Star at one point. I was contacted recently by a fan who wanted to make some like YouTube shorts, 3-dimensional videos. And I was like, yeah, that's fine, and he kept asking me if like, this is okay, is this okay? And I'm like, dude, just do whatever you want, man. Like it's fan fiction. Like, this is your thing. And if anybody ever wants to do that kind of thing, like, I really don't care. I find it like complimentary. I'm not one of those authors that thinks that like fan fiction is evil, because I used to write fan fiction. Like that really like surprised me when I heard that for the first time, that like certain authors were like really opposed to fan fiction.
It's the monetization angle that'll get them in.
Yeah.
But
because it's like fan fiction, like no one's gonna sell that. And if they tried, it's illegal. So like really you're just complaining about people writing stories in your universe on the internet.
Well,
which
the issue was that a lot of the sites would have ads that would run, or YouTube would have monetization. So you're actually by default, by any content being there, they were getting paid, which messed with copyright. But most of those, the fan fiction has a website that's truly user funded, so that's not an issue anymore on the fanfic side. And then as far as YouTube, you can choose not to monetize a video. So I think a lot of those legal concerns are gone. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't necessarily have a problem with it either. I think it's an ultimate compliment if you affect them that way.
Oh yeah, and additionally too, like if you embrace your fandom, it'll just make you more successful. I always reference Halo and Bungie, like back, when they were still managing Halo, and now I think it's like 343 Industries or whatever. But back in the day when I think Halo 1 was really like at its peak, this small company, which was just like a couple of guys, started using in-game Halo multiplayer to create like short little videos, right? And this was really the birth of a genre of filmmaking called machinima. And they're Rooster Teeth now, and they're a massive internet company based out of I think it's Austin right now, but huge company. They've got like anime, that are like in Best Buy and like Walmart and stuff, and massive production company that's expanded dramatically. But they started with this show called Red versus Blue, and it was they were just using the Halo in-game engine to bob the characters' heads up and down, and then they would put voices on top of it. And it was like the cheapest looking thing, but it was hilarious, and people really liked it. And so instead of cracking down on that like they could have, Bungie was like, oh, well, yeah, we fully endorse this. We fully endorse all forms of machinima with our games. You don't have to ask our permission. Just do it. It's the same thing that Star Wars does, where they're just like, do whatever you want, because like make a fan film if you want, like write fan fiction if you want, because whatever it is, it's going to further our brand. It's going to further the interest in the universe, and it's going to get people talking about stuff. So I've always just said, you should just support it, even if it's not great, like as long as it's coming from a good place, and fans are doing it because like they just like your universe, there shouldn't really be a problem. Even if they are making like $5 or $10 on it, like who cares?
Yeah. I think the issue really, I think it's something, if you don't defend the copyright, you lose it. So I think there are issues, and I'm not a lawyer involved, but like I said, I'm with you in the general sense. I really don't care. But what about you, John? Because we could talk about fanfic and all that all day long and bore the the other however many people are listening right now. So John, save us from ourselves.
I'm with Jeff on this one. I haven't had anybody cosplay my characters, but I did have a fan who lives in the Philippines go to a cosplay convention, and while she was there, she saw these like Archangel characters from my Archangel Wars book. It wasn't them exactly, like they weren't trying to be characters in my book, but they look exactly like them. So she sent me tons of pictures from that convention, which was cool. And then other times, like I've done talks at schools. So the teacher at one of the schools that I did a talk at, she bought a series of my books for her class. And then afterwards, the students like wrote me letters how much they liked it, and they drew pictures and stuff like that. And I've gotten other like fan artwork through emails and just online. And like what Jeff was saying, I totally support all that stuff, because not only is it really cool for me to think that other people enjoy my work enough where they're investing time creating their own art within the universe that I created, but I think it's really cool connecting with them as well, because even if they're artists, we're all creative, so our fire's all burning even if it's consuming in other directions.
Absolutely. But I realize I let the time get away from me. I'm starting to think this interview is going to go long, but I'm having fun. So bear with us, dear listener, as we pause for a moment where we shamelessly shill for the man.
When a strange symbol is found at a burned down historical site, Houston arson investigator Emi Aninzo goes to work. As mysterious and inexplicably hot fires break out across the drought-ravaged city, she finds herself digging through the ashes of history. It's a race against time to track down the serial arsonist and explain the seemingly impossible heat of the fires. As strange evidence begins to pile up, Amy wonders if the arsonist is insane, or even worse, possessed. Can Amy and her colleagues find and stop him before the entire city burns? Parsec award-winning author Paul E. Cooley wraps ancient mythology around an eerie contemporary tale that will leave you burning for more. Garber's Inferno, a free podcast novel available from shadowpublications.com and iTunes. Some mysteries shouldn't be solved.
All right, welcome back to another episode. Welcome back from the commercial, people. I'm going to pretend I've done this before. We still have Jay and Chaney, Jeff, and Jonathan Yanez here, and we're interviewing them and about to talk about their series that brought them here. So before we do that, let's round out these questions about them and their fans. So has anyone asked you for your autograph while out in public, away from a convention or a regular book signing? We'll start with you, Jeff.
Ask me for an autograph? No. I've been at like writers conferences and stuff, no one ever wants an autograph. They just want to like ask you questions and talk about like the genre and things like that. So I've had people come up to me like that I didn't know, other authors, but I've never gone to a fan convention or anything with, like a bunch of readers. So I haven't had that opportunity, and I don't really go outside a lot. So I think that kind of prevents me from running into people that might know who I am.
Have we verified he's not a vampire, Jonathan?
Not yet, man. I'm finding out new things about him all the time. I didn't know he went to Africa.
All right. So, has anyone asked for your autograph out in public, away from a convention, John?
Not autograph, but one time we went out. Not one time, a couple times now. We've gone out and just talking to people over whether it's like dinner, like friends of friends going out to dinner, or like, I don't know, like a Christmas party or stuff like that. It's cool because I've run across people who are like, oh yeah, you wrote that book. I've seen it like advertised on Facebook, or like one of my friends was talking about it. So there's a small chance they might have me confused with somebody else, but I wouldn't like to think so. I would like to think that they actually did see my book like advertised on Facebook, or one of their friends was talking about my work. So that's been super cool to experience.
I've actually seen.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say, I've actually seen your stuff, your Gateway to the Galaxy stuff, advertised on some of the mobile app games I play.
Oh, that's cool.
So,
yeah, I was just gonna say that actually reminds me of a funny story. I didn't meet anyone out in the wild or anything like that, but I had my old college roommate's girlfriend at the time is still friends with me on Facebook, and she connected with me again and was like, hey, how are you doing? She just had a kid. She's like married and stuff. And she's like, my husband was sitting in bed the other day reading, as he tends to do. And I leaned over and asked him what he was reading, and he showed me, and it was Renegade Star by Chaney. and she was like, is that Jeff? And so she looked it up, and yeah, it was me. And she like couldn't believe it, right? Because he doesn't know, he had no idea that we knew each other. But that's how small of a world it is. So I guess he's like he's in my fan group, and like he's I guess he found me through an ad or something like that. But yeah, it's just crazy. I've had that happen like twice, where a friend of a friend found me, and then it turned out like we had like a connection in common or whatever. And I've been in the middle of that too, where like I had a really good friend who was like a huge fan of Richard Fox, and I'm pretty good friends with Richard Fox. And he's like telling me about like the most recent book that he's reading. He's like, oh, I just read The Ember War. And I'm like, oh, I know that guy. Yeah, that's Richard. And he's like, oh my God, you know Richard Fox? I'm like, yeah, we talk all the time. And he's like, holy shit. And he like had this fanboy moment, where he like freaked out. And I'm like, oh, dude, yeah, if you want to talk to him, like. So I told Richard about it, and Richard sent him the entire Ember War series for free in paperback form, signed. Just to be nice. And like, he posted pictures about it, when he got the books, and it was like this huge, like fanboy moment. But yeah, I mean, like small world, sci-fi readers are I think a small ravenous bunch. And, it's not hard to like run into one of them or like in certain circles. And then coincidentally, like they've heard of your book.
Richard Fox and I, that's a bitter memories. He got me in trouble with my wife. I'm still hearing about this one.
Well, JR, when you cheat, the other end tends to be angry.
So when Podium was talking to us about our, I'll keep this short because this interview is about you, but when Podium was trying to say, hey, let us sign with your audiobooks and we can work with veterans too, they sent me a copy of the Ember Wars Publishers Pack, so book 1 and book 2 as proof of concept, and I started listening just to hear what they were doing, and I got so engrossed. I like bought every audiobook out there, and this is before I knew about Audible subscription, and my wife got the bill and she said, you spend what? Because they're like $20 a piece.
Yeah, and he has a lot of them.
He does. This is about 2 years ago at this point, so not quite as many, but still a lot. So I hope he had a nice steak dinner on me. But he's not sorry either. I've asked him about it. Not sorry at all. So all right.
He regrets
nothing. So finally, what's the weirdest or funniest story about an interaction with a fan that you've had since you started writing, Jeff?
Oh man, I don't think I've had any weird ones. I've been hit on by fans a few times. That was kind of weird.
Look, I'm sorry. All right, the restraining order. I'll honor it. I'm sorry.
I mean, nothing bad. It's just like one of those things where you'll get a message from a reader, and they're like a little too nice, and then they'll call you handsome or something. You're like, what do I do in this situation? Like, I feel really bad for like women that are in this field, because I've heard firsthand about like some of the experiences they get, and I'm just like, I get like one or two, over the course of like 4 or 5 years. But I know a girl that's gotten like, hundreds of like,
That's rough.
yeah, proposition. Yeah, man, I don't know how people deal with it. I can't even imagine. But like the one or two instances where it happened to me, I'm like, I get so uncomfortable because I don't want to be mean, like I don't like rejecting people or like being an asshole. So that kind of thing is always kind of awkward for me. So I usually just don't say anything or I play it off and I'm just like, oh, haha, thanks. And then I just like stop responding.
Jeff, you can't spend all those hours at the gym and expect that not to happen.
Oh my God. Yeah. No. Don't listen to Jonathan. So like I go to the gym and I lift weights and stuff, but like Jonathan is he's the one with all the muscles. Like that dude is like is ripped, insanely ripped.
I think he's being too nice. I like working out at the gym, but yeah, I mean, because our jobs though are like all we do is sit down, right? Whether we're writing books or doing the 100 other things around launching a book that needs to get done. It's important for authors, I think, to try to get some exercise and to stay healthy because we need these awesome authors around for a long time to come. But just like sitting down doing our craft, it's probably one of the most unhealthiest things that we could be doing day in and day out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, they say, well, just real quick, they say for like every hour that you sit per day or whatever throughout your day takes time off of your life because you're not getting exercise or standing. So it's really important to go to the gym at least 3 or 4 times a week. So that's like one of the big motivators for me is that I don't want to die, before I'm like, I want to live a really long time and be able to like travel and go on adventures and stuff like that. And, basically get out of my bubble eventually, because I spend a lot of time working. And so I'm always looking to the future and like what I want to do and the places I want to go. And then I think about like, well, how am I going to be able to do that if I have like aching back, that starts hurting after standing for 10 minutes? And I say that because I've been in that position before where I sat for, like a year ago, I was sitting all the time in a really bad chair to the point where I started having back pain just from sitting, and I would get up and walk around and then like the pain would just get worse. So that's when I started working out and I was like, okay, I gotta do something about this. And I started eating better and everything like that. And now it's all gone. It's fine. But that was sort of a wake up call for me. And I think that, like Jonathan's right, like we really have to take care of ourselves and make up for all the sitting that we do, behind our desks. And it's tough because like we have addicting jobs. I just did a live Q&A before this, in my Facebook group and I talked about this and it's like really hard to pull yourself away from the computer and stop working because you're in a job. It's like your dream job. It's the thing that you've always wanted to do. You've worked really hard to get here and like you don't want to stop. And so I know Jonathan works 7 days a week, just hours and hours a day. And I work 7 days a week too, probably not as much as he does from like the amount of words that he churns out, but still like we're all working really hard and we're spending a lot of time sitting down. And so I've heard stories from people about how they've gone out and got standing desks. I know someone who's got a treadmill desk. I don't know how these people write on those things. I can't do it. People take walks and use their phones to like record their voices, and they do it. They write that way. I'm the traditional way where I sit at the desk all, for a couple hours and I work, but then I go to the gym at like 5 o'clock at night and I work out as hard as I can to the point where the next day I can barely move. And then I don't mind sitting, and then it's fine.
So funny hearing that, Jeff, because I do the same thing, but it's funny like what we do to ourselves. Like there has to be something wrong with us to sit down and work 7 days a week and then kill our bodies physically at the gym and then come kill ourselves mentally in front of the computer, and we love it.
So I had to do that too. I finally realized that that I wasn't 22 and running 1,000,000 miles a day like I was when I was in the Army. So I got sick of my doctor just like, oh, here's a pill for this or here's a pill for that. So I shopped around to get a doctor who wasn't like a walking pharmaceutical ad. So it's amazing what happens once you're able to start doing those kind of little things. But before we turn this into the weightlifting hour, sun's out, guns out. Jonathan, what's the weirdest or funniest interaction you've had with a fan?
I don't know how weird it is, but I think it's like super sweet. I've had tons of fans offer to like send me things like Christmas gifts, like knit my daughter scarves and hats and like stuff like that and cookies. And my wife always gets angry because I give them our address and she's like, you don't know who these people are. You don't know what they're going to do. I'm like, it's going to be fine. They're not going to want my address to come and try to kill me. You know what I mean? They like my books too much. They want the next book to come out. They know if they kill me, the next book's not coming.
Yeah, they're going to kidnap you and hold you hostage.
Like in Misery?
Yeah, Misery style.
Have you?
So far.
First, I agree with your wife, get a P.O. box. And second, have you seen that comic strip about why Stephen King never meets with his fans? And it's him at a book signing and this like serial killer looking dude who's like, I'm your biggest fan. And if I'm not, tell me who they are and I'll kill them for you. It was one of those Far Side or Farscape, whatever those were, those comics that used to be back in the day. I used to get those calendars. But yeah, it always struck me. But yeah, get a P.O. box, dude. Protect that little girl of yours.
I think we'll be fine. I have too much Wolverine in me to let anything bad happen.
You got to sleep sometime.
Yeah, that's true. We got dogs and other stuff too. I don't know. Maybe I should start worrying about stuff more. I don't really worry about stuff.
I need to learn to not worry, but I'm paranoid, as everyone tells me. So, but they got pills for that if you take them.
Maybe the answer is maybe the answer is like meeting halfway in the middle.
One day I'll get there. We can start our own little support group. Not paranoid enough and too paranoid. And like maybe we'll start something. But all right. So this is the part, dear listener, where I normally list out the various series that Jeff and Jonathan have written. But they're both so dang prolific that to cover both of them would need another hour. And we're already 50 minutes in. So instead, I'll let the authors tell us where we can get a primer of their various universes. And we'll jump right into the series we're talking about. So Jeff, do you have a place where you list everything you've written and maybe like suggested reading orders, etc.?
Well, I only have 2 series. So, you have the Variant Saga, and that's, it's on Amazon, books 1 through 4. And then I have the Renegades series, which is, right now 1 through 8, with a planned additional 7 books to go. And then, of course, Jonathan and I both have together the Orion series, which has only just started. Book 2 is coming out in about 10 days. So, I think Jonathan's probably got the wider library with a lot more series under his belt. But for me, it's just the 2. But yeah. So, I mean, just, my Amazon page.
All right. What about you, Jonathan? Is there any place where you recommended reading orders?
Yeah, like Jeff said, Amazon for sure. If you just go and type my name in, Jonathan Yanez, you can look to see all the different series that I have. And then one of my fans is asking in my readers group, it's called Jonathan's Reading Wolves, by the way, if anybody wants to join. They're asking if I would put together like a recommended reading list. So I'm definitely going to do that. As soon as I come up from air in between projects, that's going to be next on my to-do list, to put like my series in order, what I would recommend for them to start reading.
Okay. So for Jonathan, it is your reading group. For both of you, it is your Amazon page. And Jeff sounds like he's got the most minimalistic series library to make it a little bit easier for everybody. Jeez. Okay. So now that that's out of the way, because like I said, we didn't want to spend an hour just reading all the hundreds of thousands of books they've written. I've looked at all of your books, and like I said, they all sounded amazing, but we're going to focus on your joint work together, the Orion Colony series. So how did you come up with the idea or premise for this joint series? Where did the spark of inspiration come from? And I'll let whoever started this answer this one.
Oh man, I had a hard time remembering what I did last weekend. Jeff, where did we come up with this book?
Well, I mean, in short, I wanted to do a spinoff in the Renegade universe, and I had an idea in mind for a certain time period, which is set 2,000 years before Jace meets Abigail in book 1, in Renegade Star. And so 2,000 years before that, humanity leaves Earth, right? It's the Great Transient Exodus is what it's called. And so in this, we have about 12 ships that leave Earth. And they look like moons, they're huge, like little Death Stars traveling the galaxy. And so none of those, all but one, is never seen again. Like they've gone off into the various parts of the galaxy and like dispersed humanity, and like people, like the portion of the galaxy that we're focused on in the main series, they've forgotten all about this, and so because of various events. So I wanted to explore what happened to one of the other ships, one of those other colony ships. And so I talked to Jonathan and I were talking about doing a co-write together, and very briefly. And then I had this idea for the story, the basic seed of the idea. And I was like, hey, I have like a really good place for us to put a story if you're interested in writing in this universe. And he gave it some thought for a few days, and he came back with a ton of ideas, and of course the usual Yanez excitement, which was just like overflowing, lots of ambition and positivity. And I like to, I feed off of that energy, myself, and we're both really positive and optimistic people. And so we just got right into it, and we started brainstorming. We made like a shared document. We worked on that for a little while, worked on the concepts and like the world building, and really the general lore and where the story would go. And so we wanted to sort of create a different kind of story from Renegade Star. Renegade Star is much more of a Firefly type adventure with a small crew that's like a mix, or a bunch of misfits from various parts of walks of life. This Orion colony became more of like a colony fiction type story with a very different lead character and a very different crew. Very much in the style of Lost, and that sort of exploration mystery side of things, where we're finding new locations, one location I guess in particular, and really exploring that and expanding that, and uncovering these ancient mysteries, and really fleshing out this universe in different ways from the main series. So you can come into Orion colony completely fresh, never having read anything else in the universe. But if you have read Renegade Star, or if you read Orion Colony first and go read Renegade later, it's going to add so much lore to the universe that I think a lot of readers will feel very satisfied. And because we're doing it in very unique and interesting ways, where it doesn't repeat anything that's happened in Renegade, and doesn't really like tread old ground. It's all new.
Okay. We'll come back to the Lost you mentioned as a reference. So, Jonathan, since this is clearly Jeff's existing Renegade Star universe, what part did you bring to the table to add to the universe?
So Jeff was really cool about, like I said, kind of like laying out a game plan, like let's do this. But inside of those parameters, he's been really cool about letting me like my imagination run wild. One thing I learned about myself, I don't really like rules. I don't like people telling me like what I can't write or what I can write, or like, oh, don't do this or you can do that. Like if they're trying to help me, that's something different. But just like black and white rules. So it's been really cool working with Jeff, because like, yeah, like when we're talking, we're just like bouncing ideas back and forth. There's no like, this is the right way or this is the wrong way. We're like, how about this? And how about there's monsters in the mist? And what about if there's like doors, like ancient doors, like nobody's open, like what's behind those doors? So that's been really cool, fleshing out the story of these survivors that crash land on the planet. And like Jeff said before, it was important for me to be different. Like we know what the readers in the Renegade universe like, but to be different than the main character. I just didn't want to do the same thing he had already done with his characters and his main character. So being a little bit different, but still giving the fans what they like. And that's been a lot of fun too.
Okay. All right. So for the rest of the questions, I'll let you guys decide who answers, because it's sort of about your joint project, so you can answer jointly. But the premise of this series reminded me of the show Lost, which you mentioned as well. So was this intentional?
Yeah. you'll have to, I guess, Jonathan will be able to give you a better answer than me. But yeah, when we talked about it, we wanted to present like I said, a lot of mysteries, but have it pan out better than Lost did, where the answers either didn't come or they come in a very dissatisfying way after several seasons. So what I prefer, I talked about this in the Q&A earlier today. I like to look at writing from a reader's perspective and like what I would want to see. And so I want my answers, within the first couple books to the big question that gets presented. And then I want like another question presented later, and another mystery. So we present a very big question at the end of the first book. And we want to satisfy that question by the end of the second or, sometime in the third book. And then we want more questions and more answers coming. Like we don't want, like we want to have a smoke monster, in book one or in like the first chapter or two, and then not explain what the smoke monster is until book 10.
Or like a polar bear in the jungle.
Yeah, exactly.
So more of a episodic approach.
Well, yeah. So I like to look at these books, like I said, sort of in a fast-paced, quick delivery kind of way. And it's like if you read the main series, every single book has its own distinct arc, its own distinct antagonist and story and everything, while still being connected. And that way you can sort of look at book one and remember that, okay, this is book one. That's what happens there. You can look at book 4 and say, well, that's the one where they get trapped on the ice planet. It's like, oh, book 3 is the one where they encounter the moon ship. It's like book 5, they fight a giant AI that takes on the form of a mech, a mech in space, like that sort of thing. Everything feels distinct and unique. And so that's what I want. That's my general writing philosophy. And so with this series, that's what we're trying to do with that too, so that every single book has its own feel and its own, story and discoveries and mysteries and answers, all while building on the same original foundation from book one. We don't want to stretch the story out unnecessarily like Lost did. And I think that is why people got really upset and ticked off about it. But, the initial mysteries it presented were so fascinating and interesting and powerful enough that they hooked people because they're in this unique area, this new world, basically, this island with all these mysteries presented to them. And like the hatch and the polar bear and like all and the others, like all these things. And then, so we're doing something like that, but in our own way. And we're not going to wait 7 seasons to tell you what it is.
Okay. So, did either of you guys watch the television show Lost then?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Okay. That's just one. It came out at a point in time where it was not conducive for me to watch that. So that aired in 2004? So my senior year of college. And then, the bulk of it aired while I was going in and out of forward deployment. So there's just no time for it. But all right. So what did you think of the show other than you weren't satisfied with the mysteries? Was there anything that you felt that it did right that sort of inspired this then?
Oh, yeah. I think they did a good job with the character development and seeing different characters interact with one another. And I think they got it right introducing all the mystery elements, like what Jeff said. But what they got wrong is having that like payoff at the end. Like they would open up all these different loops and some of them would have payoffs, but some of them would not have payoffs for seasons upon seasons. Some of them never had a payoff. So I think what we're trying to do is introduce all those mystery elements, but make sure that we're giving the readers payoffs and explaining what's going on. Not just like throwing something out there just for that cheap wonder effect and then never, giving them what they want afterwards, never giving them answers. We're definitely going to give them exactly what they're looking for. And if somebody loved Lost, this would be a good series for you, or even like Lost in Space, same thing.
Okay. So do you have anything to add to that, or Jeff, or you want to move on?
Oh, we can move on. I think that pretty much
okay.
Covered it.
So I also detected some shades of the television show Lost in Space, which I loved watching as a kid. So did the series inspire you at all, or is that just, wishful thinking on my part?
No, I think definitely. Especially the newer series that hit Netflix. I haven't seen the whole thing because TV time for me is pretty limited between hanging out with my family and writing. But the episodes that I have seen do the same thing where they introduce that mystery element. And the more and more that I write, the more and more I'm falling in love with kind of like that thriller suspense aspect instead of straight up action. Because I can do straight up action. I've been doing straight up action for years, and I still love that too. But I think kind of like what Jeff was saying, where there has to be some sort of payoff. So build it up, build it up, build it up. And then maybe with like a crazy action scene, you can give them that payoff they've been waiting for.
Okay. So, which inspired you more then? And you can either one of you answer it: the original television series, the remake of the television series, or the movie. Jeff, Jonathan, you said the Netflix, the newer series. But what about you, Jeff?
Oh, I'd say the same thing. The newer television series, because they land on that planet, and a lot of the show from there involves exploring that planet. I would also say, the same of Lost, and there was another show, I think it was called Terra Nova.
Oh yes,
where they go back, with the dinosaurs,
yes.
and that show didn't really make it because like their budget was just too high to like they had to have like massive numbers to justify the cost.
And Fox doesn't manage TV shows very well.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, like some of that too, like they go back in time to this ancient, prehistoric period because Earth is like falling apart. And when they get there, they start discovering like these really cool mysteries, like ancient writings, in the stone when like no one should be here. So we're kind of doing something like that. Not that exact thing, but something like that. And those types of mysteries, when they get to this place that they're going, they start to just uncover these like crazy things up in the planet, these mysteries. But we already have answers for what those are. And J.J. Abrams is all about his mystery box. If you watch his interviews and the way that he approaches filmmaking, he's all about having a mystery box and presenting it to the viewer and then letting them try to figure out what it is. But what his plan typically doesn't entail is knowing ahead of time what is in the mystery box. And I think that like really hurt him with Lost, and it really hurt him with like other shows and movies and stuff, with the exception of maybe Fringe. Fringe was awesome.
Yes.
But like, with us, we're going into this with our mystery box, but we actually know what's inside of it. We're planning stuff out. And, we have frequent phone calls where we talk about like, well, what do we want this to end up being? Like, how do we want this to go? And so all of that is constantly in motion. It's, it's always developing, but readers can rest assured that like we're not like just running blindly into these things. There's always some kind of plan in place.
Okay. So it seems like what you both love though about the two series we mentioned was that sense of wonder and mystery. So does that mean this is going to be sort of a hopeful series?
Oh yeah, for sure. We're not going to, no, we're not setting up readers to be, disappointed or at the end. I think by definition, there's always hope, right? Like our characters are not going to give up. That's not who they are. They're going to keep on forging forward and find a way to survive.
Yeah, actually. So one of the things, at least with my readership, is, they read to escape the real world. Like I'm not writing for the Game of Thrones audience. I'm writing classic pulp science fiction from the 50s and 60s, and those types of stories. And when the future was optimistic and it was something to look forward to, and you could be like a little hopeful about things. And it's okay to have some drama in that. It's actually really good. It's okay to have like some downer moments and some deep character development. Like we love that stuff, but at the same time, we do want to present an optimistic, exciting future where, you can have these awesome adventures and discover these mysteries. And, like we're not going to kill Ned Stark off in the first book, and don't get me wrong, I love Game of Thrones. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. But that's not the kind of story that I like to tell. There are other people to do that. But that's not how I write Renegade Star. It's not how I wrote my first series, and that's not what we're doing with our Orion colony. But to answer your question, it is a very optimistic and hopeful story with like there's always by the time the story is done with like the first or second book, it's like we have all this growth to look forward to, and you always want to end on like this hopeful, positive note. Whereas like no matter how much tragedy happens along the way.
Okay. So I read as preparation for this interview, and I always do. Obviously, I can't read everything by every author we've ever interviewed, so I tend to read the 10% sample that Amazon will let you get, that little look inside snippet, and it's definitely gave me some vibes of the movie Interstellar. I don't know if you've seen it. Was that intentional or just happy coincidence?
I think it was happy coincidence with maybe like a little bit from Interstellar, but mostly from Lost and Lost in Space. But maybe there's a little, I guess from Interstellar then would just be kind of like going out into the unknown. Kind of like that aspect, like exploring the unknown.
Okay. So would then Star Trek probably be a better fit than Interstellar as a comparison?
Yeah. That's probably a better one.
Okay. Well, then that answers that question. So I will move on.
Yeah. Actually, real quick, just to reiterate that, I'd say Star Trek is definitely a pretty good comparison. The great thing that I think a lot of us grew up with, with the Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, was always that sense of optimism for the future, and that is ever present in Star Trek. Which might be somewhat of a stark contrast to today's sci-fi media, which tends to be very dark and gloomy and gritty and just very like depressing.
Okay. So according to the blurb, this series is described as Battlestar Galactica meets Firefly with shades of Indiana Jones. So how does that unique combination fit into the Orion star? Because that is an interesting combination.
Jeff, do you want to take that one?
I said Orion star. I meant Orion Colony. I was combining.
I know what you meant.
Well, you broke up on my end when you were reading that question. Can you ask it one more time?
Sure. So according to the blurb, this series is described as Battlestar Galactica meets Firefly with shades of Indiana Jones, which I find an interesting combination. So I was asking how those three sort of congealed in your mind to describe the Orion Colony.
Well, that's the description that I put for like all the Renegade books. So I think it fits that more than it does Orion Colony. I think I have saved for the description for book 2 that it's like Lost, meets Lost in Space and Indiana Jones. But I would say the biggest takeaway on that one was probably Firefly and Indiana Jones. You have this focus on a small crew that comes together across completely different backgrounds out of necessity, and they become sort of a close-knit family. And then at the same time, you have like these ancient sort of mysteries that they're like sci-fi archaeology to an extent, and that's what we try to really bring to all the Renegade books and spinoffs, is really that sense of mystery and wonder of like what came before. And before I switched over to creative writing, I was majoring in archaeology and anthropology, and I didn't see a future in that, but there was always an interest afterwards, and so I think that's bled into everything that I write. And with Orion Colony, I knew straight away, and Jonathan was like on board very quickly with this, to have like these sort of old mysteries, where our characters were going and uncovering these things on the planet and those types of scenarios. I'm trying not to give away any spoilers. But yeah, definitely some Indiana Jones vibes, and if you like that stuff, you like that kind of excitement, that real danger of like going through catacombs and places like that, then I think readers are really going to like where we're going with the series.
Okay. So speaking of series, the Orion Colony is clearly a series because you've called it that on the Great and Mighty Zahn. So you have one book out in the series already. So what's next for these characters? Where do you sort of see it going without giving any spoilers?
Yeah, without giving away spoilers, that's a hard one to answer, but I'll do my best. So, when Jeff and I were first talking about the series, we talked about maybe just doing 3 books, but I think now we've understood that there's so much to explore on the planet that we're going to be doing more than 3 books. And where it's going to be going is just our survivors. The main character's name is Dean. So our survivors and our main character, Dean, exploring and figuring out where exactly in the universe they are, and then if they can possibly call for help, and if anybody out there is going to hear them or find them, but just a survival adventure story as they explore. And since they crash landed on a planet, like they have no idea where they are, there's tons to explore and all that. Like, you know what I mean? Like in real time, how long would it take us to explore a planet? Like, you know, it would take us a super long time. So we have plenty of fodder for imagination and plenty of different ways to go with the series.
Okay. So we all know that every literary universe has its own internally consistent technology and rules of science. So what sort of tech can we expect from these books? FTL, ray guns, teleporters? What are we going to see when we open the pages of the Orion colony?
This is a good one for Jeff. He's the universe master when it comes to this stuff. He's actually saved me a couple times because the Orion colony in this series exists in his Renegade series. So there's a couple times where I had like these seed ships, these seed colony ships were being built on Earth, but I had them being also launched from Earth. And he was like, no, we need to have them launched from Mars. So I'll let Jeff answer this question. He knows.
So in this universe, you know, technology has advanced far beyond what we have now, but it's still somewhat familiar. So it's not like so futuristic that it's like confusing and hard for, you know, the average person to wrap their head around. But it's also more advanced in the Orion colony than it was in Renegade Star, because Renegade Star, that series, the main one, that's more like Firefly in that characters have like, you know, pistols on their hip, like regular guns, because they've sort of gone backwards technologically since this time period. And so right now, while we're writing about this, you know, at this time period, this is like the peak of human technology. So we have ships the size of moons that can travel through slip tunnels, which are essentially, you know, like the space beneath our own, you know, type like slip space. They can open up tunnels and move through those tunnels freely. They can, you know, these ships can create them and move like as however they want, which is not something you can do in the main series. You know, we can only use existing tunnels. You know, our technology is so advanced that there are people known as Eternals, and Eternals are immortal human beings with albino skin, white hair, blue eyes, and you know, they're genetically almost perfect. They can regrow their limbs to a certain point. They can heal from almost any wound. Not instantly. This isn't like Wolverine, but like they are like genetically superior, and that plays into the mythology and the backstory and why all this is happening. You know, and so we've got AI known as cognitives, which are like fully sentient beings. And the Orion colony ship, this big moon, is, you know, controlled by a cognitive, and you know, she manages like everything on the ship, you know. And so we've got those in the main series, but they're like thousands of years old at that point. Some of which have gone crazy, some of which have lost lots of memories because it's been so much time has gone by. But right in this story, we're getting them at their prime. You know, like this is, like I said, when technology is at its highest. And, you know, we've got like a galactic defense network in place for Earth, you know, that like, you know, with tons of drones and a cognitive controlling that named Hephaestus, which appears in the later book, or, you know, in the main series. And so readers are going to see stuff at least in my opinion, in these books that are highly advanced, but still relatable enough. And if you've read the original series, you're going to see a lot of familiar things. But while before it was like ancient technology, now it's like present, still working, fully functional.
Okay. So while this is a question then for you, since you were the lore master, with the other series that you write in, the how do you keep this one straight in your mind? Like, how do you manage your lore then, so you don't make those mistakes, especially when you're writing two series in this universe in different points in time?
I mean, it's really not that hard, like I've never had a really hard time. I guess I get so invested in the stories that it's not really like watching a TV show or like, loosely producing something. Jonathan and I talk about the books a lot, and so they're ever present in my mind. And I'm always thinking about them. And then, outside of that, like the main series, I don't really write other stuff. I stick to Renegade. That's all I write. And so the overarching narrative is pretty concretely set in my mind, and the details are too. But additionally, on top of that, I also have like editors. I have my content editor, who has been with me since I got into writing. I met him in basic training, and he's like the smartest guy I've ever met. So he like goes through every single book that I write and checks for like consistency, and like helps me with like my shortcomings. Like I don't know weapons as well as I should, and every once in a while I'll mess something up. Like, oh well, that sniper rifle doesn't work that way, or like whatever the case is, he'll fix it. And so he's intimately familiar with the books too in the universe. And so whatever I don't catch, he'll catch, and then the other editor that I have will catch something, and then the proofreader, and they've all read the books multiple times. So we're pretty good about just like keeping the lore intact. And if we don't, for whatever reason, catch something, the readers will catch it, and then we hear about it for days, and then we fix it. So not too hard. I think as we bring in more co-writers, we have two new co-writers positioned to start in 2019 in this universe. And I think as we do that, like right now, I'm working with one of them as he reads through the books to create a Bible. So he's helping me with that. And I think that as we move forward, we'll have that Bible in place, and then it won't really be an issue. And I won't have to worry as much about it, because I'll have a point of reference to go to, and so will the writers. But for right now, because it's just me and Jonathan, and it's really just the two series, it's not that difficult for me. But it has the potential to be at some point when the universe grows exponentially larger.
Okay, fair enough. So, do you have trouble keeping it straight in your head, Jonathan, or you just let him guide the ship?
Keeping it straight, like the events that I know need to happen, or like not getting it confused with my other series, I don't have a problem with that, because like when I'm writing a series, I'm all about that series, and that's the only thing that I'm concentrating on. If another idea pops into my head for another series, I just table that and put it in the back burner. The reason I'm able to write quickly is because I just have laser focus on one thing, and then that's it. So any questions I do have about the lore, Jeff is only like a phone call away. So he's been cool about answering any questions I have about Eternals or like how they heal and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. So the next question that Chris always loves to ask about conventions and fans that know more about the books than you, we're going to skip, because we've already established that Jeff is a vampire who never leaves his house. So this next question is for you, though, Jeff. How did your collaboration with Jonathan Yanez come about? Like, how did you first discover him and decide that he was your guy for this specific series?
I met Jonathan through Justin Sloan a while ago, because they did a co-write together, and I'm friends with Justin, so we had talked briefly, and I had asked him, how was it working with Jonathan, and he had nothing but positive things to say. And so Jonathan and I connected at some point. I don't remember how or why. And then Jonathan had asked me if I would be interested. Like after we started talking and we got to know each other, he was like, would you be interested at some point in writing together? Like, we should totally do something. And I was like, yeah, sure. When I have the time, let's totally do that. And at that time, I think I was like inundated with getting the next book out, and so I was a little overwhelmed. But a few months later, when things settled down a bit, and I had started thinking about ideas, that's when I went to him and I was like, I've got an idea if you're still up for it, and he was, and it just went from there. But yeah, I would say like Justin Sloan and their co-write together opened that door.
Okay. So, Jonathan, first, I think we need to take a moment of silence to mourn the bromance that died when Jeff stole you away from me. So please give me a second.
We need to get tattoo tears,
okay.
like the prisoners.
Yeah, we'll do that. Commemorate what once was. But okay. Back to the follow-up question. So what was your reaction to, I'm sorry, it's a little emotional, but what was your reaction to Jeff's proposal?
What's cool about working with Jeff is that he knows his universe so well, and there's such a crazy following behind his books already. So it was like there was never anything in my mind like these books could ever fail, because both of us independently have done well. So I knew that bringing both of everything that we know and we've grown over the last 2 years for our individual businesses, bringing those together, that it wasn't going to be a hard sell or hard to get this series off the ground. So yeah, I was just excited to start.
Was there anything about this project specifically that's like any one aspect of it that excited you more, or just in general terms?
It was exciting for me to have another series to go to, because I'm winding down my Gateway to the Galaxy series. The last book in that series already launched, so I'm done with that one. And then I have my next series launching in February, but that's only 3 books. That we're going to rapid release. I'm going to rapid release that one with April Baker, and then we're done. So it was cool to kind of see like what's going to be next on the horizon. And then as Jeff and I have been working, everything has been really cool, and the book 1 has been well received. We plan on going, further than just 3 books in this series. Maybe even going like 6 to 9, depending on, if fans are still liking it and everybody's happy.
Okay. So in the preparation for this, I asked about aliens because, I like talking about it. Obviously, I write science fiction. So, and you told us in the most vague term possible, so you didn't give me any spoilers, that this series will eventually have at some point aliens in it of varying degrees of sentience. So how do you come up with these aliens? Do you come up with them out of whole cloth, or do you let nature sort of inspire you? Like what do you guys do when you're creating the aliens for this universe?
Well, right now we've hinted that there are aliens, and in book 2, I don't want to give too much away for the fans, but in book 2, we might see some of these. So I don't want to answer that question in depth because I don't want to ruin it for anybody. But yes, for sure, we are. Jeff and I are talking about how we are going to set that up for the future.
So then, when you both, we can speak in more general terms without talking specifically about this series. Then, when you both are sitting at the writing desk and you said, "Let's create these aliens for whatever universe it happens to be," like what goes through your head? How do you design your aliens?
Oh, okay. So not specifically for Orion, it could be like for any universe.
I asked for this series, but you've implied that answering that would give spoilers. So let's ask it in the more general sense. When you create aliens, as someone who also loves the genre of science fiction, like when you're making your own aliens, what do you like? How do you do it? Like, what's your process?
I don't know. I always see just like images. I usually write what I see in my head, so I can imagine an alien. And usually, I'm drawing from inspiration, whether it's like Star Wars or the Green Lantern Corps, or an animal or something like that. And then I go ahead and see that in my mind, what they would look like, and I just write down what I see.
Okay. What about you, Jeff?
So with aliens, I always try to make them unique and interesting. I love Star Trek to death, but because of budgetary reasons, they can only do so much with their aliens. So the running joke became like, oh, well, just change their forehead, and put a little makeup on. So for our stuff, I really like to, I really want to provide like a new, unique type of thing, but not so alien that it's like impossible to communicate with or whatever. But we're gonna have varying degrees of like he said, like Jonathan said, sentience, and I think you're going to see that reflected in the types of aliens that we present. I typically, like in Renegade Star, we have different forms of humans um, along the evolutionary ladder in the future. So you have transients, which are normal people. Then you have eternals, which are that like albino, um, genetically engineered, long-lived, fast healing human. Then you have eventually a type of human called a celestial, and they are probably the most alien of the three. They actually look like angelic beings, and they're like extremely powerful creatures, but they're still humans. Like they evolved from human beings. That's self evolution. What we're gonna do is going to be an exploration into alien life and how varied that can be. But in Renegade Star, there are no aliens. They're never talked about. We never see any, just variations of humans. So we have to keep all of that in mind too while we write this, because it is a prequel series that takes place 2,000 years before. It's in a galaxy with very little alien life, but lots of like animal life and lots of like humans and everything. So we can't really go over the top. We can't have like 50 different species or even 10 different species, and we have to be very careful about how we present them and in what context. So I'm trying not to give anything away with all that, but readers will see, I think, what I'm trying to say when they get into it.
Okay, so rapid fire answer. Aliens. I have to ask, are there aliens out there? Jeff, go.
Yes.
All right, John, go.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, that's the right answer. You get to stay. All right. So I've skimmed the reviews as I always do. This helps the right readers find the right book. So please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your first book in this series has 35 reviews with a 4.75 rating. The only 3 negative reviews mention editing issues. I know you both used professional editors, so I took these reviews with a grain of salt. I only mentioned them to ask this: why do you think indie authors get hit with these blanket charges of lacking editing without specific examples? I've seen it on books a lot lately and wondered if the reader was reading the same book that I was, and it has me wondering, what do you think this means about the shifting reader base or just the industry in general?
I don't know if they know for sure that we're indies. Like, I don't know how many readers are aware of that when they're reading a book and or leaving a review. So I don't know. I chalk it up like to who knows. I mean, if there was a comma out of place, like some people get crazy about commas out of place, or if there was a period that should have been a question mark, some people go crazy about that. So, I mean, I try to take it all with a grain of salt. Like you said, there's 4.75 out of a 5-star rating.
Absolutely.
So if the worst thing people had to say was that there was, a typo that they found, they didn't even tell us what it was, then it's all right. You can't please everybody, right? I mean, we're writing for the masses, so we know for sure not everybody's going to love it.
All right. And what about you, Jeff? Do you have anything to add, or are you just gonna go with that one?
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to reviews, you have to take a lot of the editing comments with a grain of salt. I have run Renegade Star through 4 editors since its debut, for various reasons. Because I'll go through and change something, or I'll make heavy edits, and I just want to make sure that everything's fine. And to this day, I mean, I still get like occasional reviews that vaguely mention an editing issue or a formatting issue or something like that. But they're so vague, like they don't actually specify anything. They don't give examples, they don't do anything like that. So I feel like, and I've encountered, and this isn't to, call anyone out or anything like that, but like I've encountered readers who have come to me before and they've said like, you've got some issues here, and they'll point to it, and then I look at what they're talking about and it's like completely wrong, but they think that it's right. And a lot of us have misconceptions about grammar, punctuation, and all that. word choice, and we think that when you have a sentence fragment in a first-person narrative, that's wrong, when it's actually a stylistic choice. And I don't think a lot of people fully understand that. It's like, yes, okay, like if you're an English professor and you're writing, or you're writing a paper or whatever, yes, there are certain rules that have to be in place. But when you're writing a piece of fiction, those rules change, and that's the same with third person, first person, especially because you're writing someone's voice. A lot of things go out the window. Doesn't mean that the book can read like ass or anything like that, but there are certain things that change stylistically. And so people will present, what they consider grammatical mistakes, but when they're actually not. And so I assume when I read those reviews a lot of times that's what I'm getting, is someone that has a high opinion on grammar, and but they don't fully understand that those things might change when you're writing fiction.
Okay, so continuing with the analysis of the reviews, which I look at before buying novels, the rest of those that rated you had positive sentiments. One of those reviewers felt that you guys developed the bad guys even better than you did the good guys. So was this intentional? And what is it about bad guys that you think draws readers in? I often find myself siding with the protagonist, Goth Solus, Darth Vader, the Emperor writ large.
Yeah, so it's always important for me. I always remember that your hero can only be as great as your villain. So when you have a villain out there, especially a crazy one, and I like writing crazy villains the best just because, I don't know, I always feel like I have that side in my head saying like, oh, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe you could do it this way. So when I'm writing villains, again, just, making them super strong and believable and for the most part crazy, so that your hero has someone, very, very harsh or combative to deal with, because your hero has to rise to a new level to be able to defeat the villain in their story. So yeah, for sure, it was done on purpose. I wanted to make sure that the villain in our story was very believable and people could relate to him too.
All right. Well, then the next question. So I know we're running long, so I'll ask the next question to you, Jeff. So continuing on with the positive reviews, I see that this book was positively compared to Heinlein and Asimov, saying that this novel brought back the sense of wonder and joy of exploration that they felt was missing from modern science fiction. How humbling is that comparison? I mean, like, wow, literally, wow. Like when I got that section of the review, I remember it was like 1:00 in the morning my time, and I'm sending poor Jonathan these messages, and I was highly impressed, by the way, with that comparison for you guys. But what is it about those style of writing, that joy and wonder, that you think appeals to you as a writer and a reader, that they're seeing in your books?
Well, I'm flattered, of course, when I see stuff like that, but having read Heinlein, and Asimov over the years, and growing up, well, not necessarily growing up with it, but when I was in college and stuff, reading them extensively, and idolizing those names, just like Kurt Vonnegut, Orson Scott Card, and Joe Haldeman. To be compared to that, I think is a little unfair to them because it's I think that's it's humbling for me, but I think I have a long way to go before I can ever come close to that mountaintop, both in style, experience, and just knowledge. Like Isaac Asimov, he wrote over 400 books, most of which were nonfiction, and was at his time a modern day Renaissance man. Like he was well versed in multiple sciences, history, everything. The man was an expert on multiple topics, um, and so when you read his stuff, all of that comes through. Like he was writing hard science fiction in ways that no one had ever seen before. So, and when you read the Foundation series, which is what my books get likened to more often than not, I think because of the Lost Earth aspect of it, that's cool. But at the same time, those books are on just a completely different level. just as far as stories go, and I think that there's a reason that they're classics and they're always going to be classics. And that has always been like a dream of mine to be at that level. As I think it is with most authors, like Jonathan mentioned growing up reading C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. And we've all heard the stories about how they were best friends taking a writing class together, smoking pipes at the local pub like hobbits in the evening and talking about stories. And I think we all, to a certain level or to a certain degree, like want to be like that. Like we want to be remembered like that, um, and go down in history and have our books read for generations. I think I have a long way to go before I get to that point, if it ever happens. But anyway, to answer your question, I really appreciate it when people do that. It means a lot to me. Like I think more than people realize, because those are my heroes.
Okay. Well, that review would be hard to top, so I won't even try to bore the readers. After that, we'll go out on top. So, are there any other forms of media that are coming out in this universe? RPGs, movies, video games, etc. On the Renegade Star / Orion Colony universe?
Yeah. So Jonathan and I are always talking about expanding into different media with Orion Colony. We've talked about video games, we've talked about comics, we've talked about like short films and different things like that. And so, depending on how successful the series becomes, we can branch out and explore additional, forms of media. As far as the Renegade Star series as a whole, the universe goes, we're bringing in Josh Hayes and Scott Moon next year to write a new series. I'm putting together an anthology of short stories of varying sizes that'll be both written by fans as well as other, prolific writers. So we have like CC Ekeke coming in to write a story in this universe. We have like, of course, all of the co-writers. So Jonathan, I'll be writing one. Josh Hayes, Scott Moon, and I've got reaching out to other people too. I think you know possibly. Well, I just won't. I don't want to say any unconfirmed names yet. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but yeah, we might have that coming in about mid 2019. And of course, I'm always open to like video games and movies and all that stuff. It's just really difficult to get off the ground when it comes to visual media. Comic books are a little bit easier, but the value in doing them just isn't quite there yet. But it is something that we could do. So we're just always keeping our options open, and we're always receptive to that type of stuff. Like I said, I had a fan reach out and ask if he could make some short videos for Renegade Star. So I never say no, at least I try not to. And if the universe presents something that seems really cool like that, I'm not going to say no to that.
Okay. So, was there anything about the Orion Colony series that we didn't ask that you want to cover before we start wrapping this stuff up?
Well, before we move on, just real quick, Jonathan actually has a video game that's in development. I don't know if he wants to talk about that.
Oh yeah, the video game. It's a mobile app that's coming out for Gateway to the Galaxy. So if that does well and everybody's happy with myself and like the company, and it makes sense to invest, some more money and some more time, we could definitely open up that option to the Orion Colony, like as a mobile video game app as well.
Okay. So, other than that, though, we got anything you want to add before we start the wrap up portion?
I think just that Orion Colony, we are like a week away, very close to signing a deal with Audible for the Orion Colony. So people who just prefer to listen to audiobooks, or if they're super busy, they don't have time to read, they can be excited about that. That should be coming out, if everything moves along, early 2019.
Okay. Since you've written this novel in the genetic engineering subgenre, what's your biggest pet peeve when you're reading about other medically enhanced peoples? Remember, speak generally. We don't need to call anyone out. Karma is a thing. So, Jeff, what's your biggest pet peeve in the genetic engineering subgenre?
I don't really have one, I guess. I think it's when it just gets a little like when you get close to fantasy levels of sci-fi, where it's just over the top and unrealistic. Like there's only like genetics are really interesting. Like all my books contain some kind of genetic engineering aspect to them, especially the first series that I did. So, I love that stuff, but genetics can only change so much, and you can only do so much with that. Um, so I have like cringe moments sometimes where I'll see something in a movie and it's like, okay, well, this person just became like a god because they like had it was like a genetic experiment on them. And knowing what I know about genetics, it's sort of like it's very unrealistic and everything. And you don't see that a whole lot though. I think people are pretty good about keeping it realistic and grounded to an extent. Sometimes when you watch something like X-Men, you just have to suspend your disbelief and just go with it. But that's genetic engineering. Well, natural genetic evolution, I guess. But yeah, I don't really see it too often with books. I find that most sci-fi authors that delve into genetic engineering tend to do an okay job at it. Or at least keep it vague enough to where we can fill in the gaps ourselves with our own imaginations.
All right. What about you?
Um,
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut you off.
Oh no, I was just going to say that like the only time that I really have an issue with that is when people over explain and they get too involved in the minutia of it and then they mess up,
Okay.
because they're not geneticists, and so if you get too specific about things like that, it's bound to cause a problem to somebody. And I've been guilty of that myself, so that's why I say that.
Okay. Well, the next question then is going to be for you, Jonathan, as we want to end this section on a positive note. So, what about genetic engineering done right? Obviously, you give yourself top billing. So, who would be your second pick for the best in this subgenre?
I think he might be a little bit more steampunk, but there's a author who I know. His name's James Blaylock, and he actually teaches at Chapman University, which isn't too far away from where I live. And I've been on a panel with him before. And I think he does it really well. Again, he's a little bit more steampunk than genetic engineering, but he has some of that in there as well. He does a good job of it.
Okay. Well, I will list him in the show notes and we can do that. So, last question. What are you guys reading in the genre? Because enough about your books. Shameless plugging is over. What are you guys reading? Jonathan, you go first. This is the Mad Minute, so I need you to answer quickly. Chris is going to kill me for having to edit all this.
I'm just finishing up Old Man's War. I do audiobooks, so listening to that in the car while I'm driving around, just trying to immerse myself in that sci-fi genre and learn as much as I can.
What about you, Jeff?
Well, I just read the Bobverse books. Well, the first one, I should say. I'm like halfway through the second one, and that was one that I listened to on audio. And I've been moving, so and unpacking, so I haven't had as much time to read. But I recently read a Stephen King book, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, which isn't really sci-fi; it's just a horror book. But yeah, I've also been binge watching, Daredevil, so there's that too.
All right. And since we are already at the 1 hour and 50-minute mark, we're going to skip the, science fiction the science articles that you guys are excited by. I will leave those links in the show notes for you, dear listener, so you can see what we would have said if we hadn't gone super, super long. But I feel like what we got was good stuff. So I hope you'll be understanding. And before we bring this race to a close, Jeff, how can listeners find you?
You can go on to jnchaney.com. It doesn't get updated as much, though, so that's not the best place to see what I'm doing. If you're really looking for up-to-date information, almost on a daily basis, I would look on Facebook for J.N. Chaney's Renegade Readers. We have a Facebook group of over 2,000 sci-fi fans, and very positive, very inviting people. Everyone loves talking about sci-fi and just books in general. So if you're looking for a good place to connect with people, like-minded people, that's a nice little hub that we've created. And on top of that, I have a Facebook fan page, and Amazon. You can find my email on there. if you want to talk to me directly.
Okay. And what about you, Jonathan?
I was really similar to what Jeff was saying. If you go to Facebook, I have a group called Jonathan's Reading Wolves. And then for like, if you just prefer a newsletter, you can go to jonathan-yanez.com. And then that's my website, and you can join that newsletter too.
All right. And you can find us at www.sfshenanigans.com. Our Twitter is at SFS_show, Sierra Foxtrot Sierra _show. Our email is podcast@sfshenanigans.com. And our Shenanigans Facebook group is facebook.com/groups/sfshenanigans. Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Chris Winder, I'm J.R. Handley, and this was the Sci-Fi Shenanigans Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of space and all things that go boom.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that archived episode that was in the digital memory hole that we found. We thought you'd enjoy it. So thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the archive for the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back at our regular scheduled time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom.